Free Palestine!
When I was there, I did on average see a kid shot in the head every single day. So, I was there for 14 days, and I saw 13 kids who had been shot in the head.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We begin with coverage of hundreds of Jewish Voice for Peace activists shutting down entrances to the Holy of Holies, the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street in New York. The corporate media likes to portray the violence in the Middle East as Muslims against Jews. But note here, these are Jews trying to stop the genocide.
Let's get the hand here over.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Security of Israel. and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad.
The right to live in freedom. The right to return home. The right to return home.
Now, some deep criticism of the October 14th coverage of NBC Nightly News of the events in Palestine. On that day, there was a particularly gruesome Israeli massacre at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Jabalia camp. There was video of Palestinians connected up to IVs burning to death, but that fact was not mentioned on NBC Nightly News. In the middle of the program, there was 3 minutes with the family of American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who had been taken hostage and who was killed by Hamas or another Gaza Palestinian group in August. All right, we're not going to begrudge any coverage for this American. His family is undoubtedly in shock and agony. Still, Goldberg Poland's capture and killing has been given wide and continuous publicity. His parents spoke at the Democratic Convention. The killing of Turkish-American Ayşenur Aygi in September has received no such attention. Recall, she was observing a demonstration in the West Bank when she was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. There were no statements of outrage from the White House about her murder. You see, the administration is still waiting for the results of the Israeli investigation. This is how the NBC network reported on what happened at Al-Aqsa Hospital. The network gave it 13 seconds. On the screen, you saw a video of orange flames, and you heard these words. Meanwhile, in Gaza, officials said 3 Israeli airstrikes killed dozens, including at a hospital, which Israel also says housed Hamas, sending a tent shelter for displaced persons up in flames. Consider those words, which Israel also says housed Hamas. Corporate news always has to feature Israel's latest excuse. In this case, the hospital supposedly housed Hamas. What does that even mean? Another command center? Was it in a tent or in a ward between hospital beds? Or was Hamas in the hospital beds? This contemptible explanation is just reported by NBC without comment. None of the dozens dead were named by NBC News. Middle East Eye reported one was Shaban al-Dalu. He was a first-year college student. He wanted to become an engineer. Unfortunately, Israel destroyed his university and his home. Last week, Shaban miraculously survived an Israeli strike on a mosque that claimed 20 lives. He was injured. On the 14th, he was in a tent with an IV strapped to his arm. He was murdered along with his mother. Jabalia is surrounded. No one is allowed in or out. The Israeli army commands that Al-Auda hospital be evacuated. Evacuated to where? What is the supposed rationale for the attack on Jabalia? Is there something there that Israel wants to capture? The Palestinian fighters are in the tunnels or in the rubble, not in the tents. It appears there is another slaughter or perhaps an extermination in the offing. In a cruel joke, the Biden-Harris administration has let it be known that Israel has been told that if it doesn't allow food into northern Gaza, Israel could be found in violation of U.S. law, and the U.S. might take some action. Israel is given 30 days to clean up its act. As if Israel hasn't been committing war crimes for 365 days. Now, from an interview I did today with Dr. Feroze Sidhwa, Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Did an interview with him on October 16th, and you should watch it. But we had more time in our talk with him, and we were able to go into much greater detail about Israel's cruelty against Palestinians in Gaza. I'll be speaking to Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. He's authored a major article that was printed in the New York Times on October 13th. It's called 65 Doctors, Nurses, and Paramedics, What We Saw in Gaza. 2 weeks earlier, he and those doctors sent an open letter to the president and vice president laying out what they saw in Gaza and asking for a meeting. Dr. Sidhwa is a trauma and general surgeon whose practice is in California. Good morning.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Your article opens with a description of Palestinian preteens shot in the head or chest, some as young as 5. One can perhaps understand children injured accidentally in bombings, but why would so many children be killed from one shot to the head?
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone understands what we're trying, or what I was trying to argue with that. I'm not a war crimes investigator. I can't tell you why on a specific day a specific child got shot in the head. I'm a doctor. I'm in the trauma bay waiting for people to come in when they've been hurt. But when I was there, I did on average see a kid shot in the head every single day. So, I was there for 14 days, and I saw 13 kids who had been shot in the head when I was there. So when I came back, I honestly didn't. Number one, it's hard to keep track in your head of okay, it's Tuesday. While I've been here, I've seen 3 kids shot in the head. Now it's Thursday. I've seen 5 kids. Your brain, or my brain at least, doesn't work that way. But I kept the journal while I was there. And it certainly made an impression on me because it's, you don't see kids shot in the head that often. I'm a trauma surgeon in a very violent part of the country, in the United States, I mean, but you don't normally see that many kids shot in the head, obviously. But I just assumed it was my experience. It probably didn't generalize. But then I got back, and this is the story I told at the beginning of the Times piece. It's true. It's not invented. I got back and I went to a conference, and I met an emergency room doctor, and I just casually said, I couldn't believe how many kids I saw shot in the head. And he said, oh yeah, me too, just every day. I said, oh, okay, well, that's 2 of us now. And he was at a different hospital at a different time than I was. So I'm like, okay, well, that's strange. So then I got the idea to look into it. And that's where our first open letter to the Biden administration came from. That was sent on July 25th, if I remember right, whatever the day after Netanyahu's, if you want to call it a speech to Congress was. So out of that, I started to realize that actually a lot of people saw kids shot in the head on a daily, on a regular, if not daily basis. And that's a pattern, right? So the New York Times opinion editors reached out to me, and their opinion team, visual opinion team, reached out to me and said, can we is there a way to write something about this? So we came up with the idea of doing a poll of every healthcare worker that's been to Gaza since October 7th that I could find at the time, about what they saw. And it's the New York Times, so obviously they're interested in things that have a political impact, right? Or that have political relevance, I guess I should say. So we made up a poll of healthcare workers, and I don't remember the exact numbers. 65 people answered the poll in total, but almost everybody who worked in the appropriate setting, so the emergency room, the ER, the OR, or the ICU, almost everybody who worked in those settings saw kids shot on a regular, if not a daily basis. Like in my case, it was a daily basis. So that's a pattern. It's not an issue of this kid was shot in this way. This kid, it's just this many kids coming in with single gunshot wounds to the head or chest, or in some cases, gunshot wounds to the head and the chest. That is a pattern sustained over a year throughout Gaza, in the catchment area of almost every hospital in Gaza, anytime an international healthcare worker was around. And it's that pattern that I interpret to be as evidence of violence being deliberately directed at children. I have a very hard time, like I was on a podcast with a guy named Noam Dworman 2 days ago now. And he's an honest fellow, but he describes himself as being pro-Israel, which is fine. And he said, well, isn't it possible that some of them were shot by? I said, yeah, no. I can't. I'm not talking about individual cases. I can't. I wasn't there, and even if I was there, I wouldn't know what the hell happened. I'm just a doctor. I'm not some ballistics guy. I'm not a trained sniper. I don't know anything about it. I have a pistol license, but I don't really know anything about guns. And nor would it help if I did. I'm not a war crimes investigator. So he said, isn't it possible that this kid was shot by Hamas, or this kid was shot by the Israelis, but by accident, and it's not criminal? I said, yeah, no, that's entirely possible. But I have a hard time believing that a widespread pattern of shooting children, and we're talking about small children, not 15 or 17-year-olds, that they got shot too, but we're talking about that what we're focused on is small children. A widespread pattern in the catchment area of every hospital in Gaza, throughout Gaza for a year, that it's hard to believe that's not deliberate killing on the part of Israeli soldiers. Now, some people have gone on to say, oh, this guy says Israel's ordering its soldiers to. No. I don't have the slightest idea what Israel is ordering people to do. Furthermore, I can't imagine. It strikes me as just being credulous nonsense to think that Yoav Gallant gets on, the Israeli defense minister gets on his phone every morning and says, I want 12 children killed today. I want 9 children. That's ridiculous. He's a general. I doubt he's a psychopath. Or I think he's a general. I don't know. He's a defense minister, but I doubt he's a psychopath or a sociopath, whatever the right term would be. But nevertheless, Israel remember, this is a technologically sophisticated army. It's not some ragtag group of people running around. They have body cameras. From what I understand, I could be wrong again, I'm not a military expert. From what I understand, most of their sniper scopes have visual or have video equipment. Obviously, all of their drones have video equipment. And so they know who they're shooting. It's not like they're confused. They're well aware of who they're shooting. And furthermore, it's not like I'm the first person to report this. There's plenty of video of kids being shot in Gaza. It's not.
I mean, sure, back in the Great March of Return in 18.
Yeah, and there's a long pattern that predates October 7th. Exactly. Like you can read B'Tselem's reports. Forget Gaza, where there's a so-called state of armed conflict. Go to the West Bank. Hamas basically doesn't exist there. You can read B'Tselem's report called on what they call the open fire policy in the West Bank, where they say, I can't remember the exact words. I read it a long time ago, but the words are something like, the Israeli military takes no action against soldiers who wantonly and recklessly fire into civilian communities, even when they kill children. It's not hard to understand, and this isn't new. It's just not. And the Great March of Return is something that I am. It's hard to. I think people who want to see the level of brutality that existed in Israel especially towards Gaza, but really towards Palestinians in general, before October 7th, really should read the UN's report about it. Israel lined up. Now, in this case, we know exactly who shot who, because it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a state of armed conflict. The first, I can't remember exactly, but I think about the first 6 months of the Great March of Return. The UN report on it describes it as literally being a festival. There was people cooking food, there's dancing. It was basically what you would think of as in an American protest, like an American street protest against a war or something like that. There's no violence, nothing. Not even, just nothing that could even remotely be considered violence. The Israelis built berms, large hills for snipers to rest on, and they very calmly and systematically targeted women, doctors or medics, I guess you could say, journalists, crippled people. This is crazy. I mean, like the UN
There was an
report.
article in Haaretz that talked about soldiers having a competition to
Yeah,
see how
yeah,
many-
that's a really important article to read. That it's an interview with an Israeli sniper, and he says that they were collecting kneecaps.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we were shooting people. The goal, and again, ordered and not ordered, who knows? But this is what they were doing, and they did it for years continuously. So it's hard to believe that it wasn't policy. Even if the policy was just to allow them to continue what they're already doing, that's the same thing as making policy. He describes.
Former New York Times reporter Chris Hedges back in 2001 wrote a piece in Harper's, talking about how the Israeli soldiers would shoot kids for sport. So this is
Well, I'll tell you a story. When I lived in the West Bank for about, I can't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks now, but in 2005, the summer of 2000, no, sorry, 2006, the summer of 2007, 2006 or 7, doesn't matter, early in the 2000s. And I lived with a Palestinian family, the Abu Hashash family. Musa was the dad. Musa was a field worker for B'Tselem, and the Fawar refugee camp was here. Route 6 was here, and his family lived on the hill across from Fawar. So his kids would walk down the hill every day, walk across the Route 6, and go to school. There's a sniper tower right at an Israeli sniper tower right at the entrance to the refugee camp. And Musa told me this story, and I had no reason to think that he's lying about this. There was a little boy during the height of the Second Intifada when there was a checkpoint and you couldn't drive into the camp. You had to get out of the car, walk across the checkpoint, and then get into another car. There was this little boy who would make a shekel by just running people's bags back and forth. Poor kid, very poor family, dirty, no shoes. He'd done this for months. And Musa said he's sitting there observing the checkpoint. Again, he's a field worker. This is the checkpoint that his children have to walk past every day to go to school. And he sees an Israeli soldier up there. The guy just walks down, gets down on a knee in the middle of the day. It's not nighttime. Place is full of people. Just gets down on one knee and blows that kid's head off. That is pretty extreme. Now, that's one case. We can't generalize on one case, obviously, but the point is that this is hardly new. It's very, I don't mean to, the reality of how Israel I always want to emphasize, this is my concern is not what Israel is doing. My concern is what the United States is doing by backing Israel. What the US and Israel have done to the people of Palestine is really not widely appreciated in the level of brutality and often sadism that's gone along with it. There's many. It's not. I don't want to pretend that I'm some historian talking about like individual historical events. That's ridiculous. There are plenty of professionals, human rights groups, UN investigators, Israeli human rights groups, especially Israeli human rights groups, academics. There's no shortage of these people. Professionals who dedicate their lives to understanding these things who have come to the same conclusions. So I'm not, in other words, I'm not trying to construct my own understanding of this. I'm going with what is well known and well understood. It's a very brutal history. So the fact that you're saying, or like you're implying, the fact that Israeli soldiers are shooting children in Gaza is actually not that surprising, and that's probably why I just wasn't that shocked by it when I saw it. I was surprised by how many I saw, but it wasn't that new. What was new to me in Gaza was actually the starvation that I saw. That's not been a part of the Israel-Palestine conflict, at least.
Before we get into that, so just again, when were you in Gaza this year, and at what hospital?
I worked at the European hospital on the southeastern edge of Khan Yunis from March 25th to April 8th.
Okay, so that's a bit south of Gaza. Is that hospital still functioning?
So the hospital was forcibly evacuated on July 2nd, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was emptied of all doctors, nurses, patients, and then it was looted by desperate people trying to find something to survive, something to burn to be able to cook, something, uh, something to sleep on, etc. My understanding is that it is now it's no longer under siege, so you can walk in to the hospital. But what its level of functionality is, I can't tell you. I know most of the equipment was destroyed and things like that. So it's every time it's really important to understand. If you like I'm at my hospital right now. If a military were to come here, lay siege to the hospital, destroy the place, we actually wouldn't reopen it until it was actually fully stocked. All the walls have been ripped out and repaired, all the equipment had been restored, we wouldn't just say, oh, the military left, great, open the doors back up. But that's what's happening in Gaza, because otherwise, where are people going to go? They're just opening the doors as soon as the evacuation order isn't in effect anymore, or at least it seems safe to open the doors. Safe, yeah, being a relative term. And and then they're hoping that the WHO can bring in supplies to restore what was destroyed. Whether or not they can, nobody has any clue. It's completely inconsistent. It's totally unreliable. So, Gaza European Hospital, just to put like a fine point on the matter, Gaza European Hospital is a neurosurgical and cardiac and orthopedic center. It's not really a trauma center. It was built by Europe and by the European Union in the 80s. It was paid for by European Union in the 80s to be a subspecialty hospital for surgical care for Khan Yunis. And now I don't honestly know. Does their CT scanner work? If not, neurosurgery is completely kaput. Do they even have an EKG machine? If not, cardiac care is completely worthless.
More next week. But you can see the whole interview right now on our YouTube channel of The Struggle Video News. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle Video News.